beginnings.
My mom was a maid, my father was a janitor, but it wasn't their occupation that made me focus. It was the values that they instilled in their children, all 9 of us.
To the top echelons of power.
As your incoming chair of the Democratic National Committee, I promise you, my friends, I commit to all Americans that we will have a party that you can be proud of.
She has always held certain values dear.
Every time we step into one door, somebody tries to shut down another door. But ladies and gentlemen, when you get into that door, keep the door open, find your seats at the table, and bring in some folding chairs and let others in the room with you.
Today, Sirius XM proudly presents the latest in our Leading Ladies series. Leading Ladies, Donna Brazile, with your host, Progress Zone, Mark Thompson.
Welcome, everyone, to Sirius XM here in Washington, D.C. for another installment of our Leading Ladies series. Obviously, I'm a man, and it's very much an honor for me to have been asked to host this Leading Ladies. Just so you know, this is a series where we have candid interviews with women who are successful and inspirational, and women who have been successful using their grace, grit, and their wisdom. And we have one such person here today speaking of success. Many of you who've listened to my show over the years know that I do a benediction at the end of the show. And one of the things I always say is respect, honor, and protect all the women, because we can judge the conditions of a community by the political maturity of its women. Our very special guest today not only represents that political maturity, but represents success. I would even dare say she may be, in our generation, the most successful and most prolific organizer that we've had. From the United States Student Association, the 20th anniversary of the March on Washington, the organizing of the campaign to get the Martin Luther King Jr. national holiday, the Housing Now March, we all remember in D.C., 7 presidential campaigns, 56 congressional campaigns, 19 state and local campaigns. She's done it all. Please welcome the chair of the Democratic Party, Donna Brazile. Please give her a round of applause.
Let me, I would be remiss if I didn't say that throughout my almost 3.5 decades here in the District of Columbia, as a resident, as an organizer, as an activist, someone who really have come to call this my home away from my beloved home in Louisiana. It has been my greatest honor and pleasure to have known you, Mark, for all of these years, mainly. I know I'm a little older than you. I'm not going to age you, but I've known you since you were a young activist, coming out of NAACP, working to make D.C. the 51st state. Together, we worked with Kathy Hughes on 4th and H at Radio 1, WOL, and all of the tremendous work that you've done to fertilize and not just the seeds of change, but also to help enlarge our electorate. So I just want to thank you for your tenacity, your unbelievable grace, as you have faced so much as well. And improving the lives of ordinary citizens. So I say this with love, because he is a wonderful brother, a great role model, and you are an example of what our elders and our ancestors wanted to see in all of us, and that is someone who would use their power and influence to empower others. So thank you so much.
Thank you for saying that. Very, very kind of you. I'm going to age myself.
Okay.
You and I met when I was 17, in 1983, August, for the 20th anniversary of the March on Washington.
That's right.
And that was a tremendous experience, and kind of where I got, you know, my political introduction. And the next year, you were organizing Jesse Jackson's campaign.
That's right.
And I was back home in Nashville. I was the self-appointed Nashville director for for Jesse Jackson. But, you know, and I appreciate your words. One thing I failed to mention, I should mention, though, in terms of what Donna did. I'm a male hosting Leading Ladies. But yesterday was the anniversary of the Million Man March.
That's right.
And if not for Donna, that would not have happened, because Donna helped us to shepherd all the permits, everything that needed to happen. Got Congress out of town. Told Newt Gingrich and them, you all can go ahead and leave town. And it's very, you know, it was so meaningful. Brother Raheem Jenkins is here. The door the president comes out of to take the oath of office, we were in that doorway. And right. Raheem and I walked out of that door together 21 years ago yesterday because of Donna Brazile to begin the call to prayer for the Million Man March. And there was a lot of heat for that, of course, yes. You doing that. Yesterday also would have been my mother's 72nd birthday. And I want to begin there, Donna, because I think it's important people know a little bit about your roots, and also how you always, even in your book Cooking with Grease, tied things into cooking.
Family.
Louisiana, because that's, how many people here from Louisiana, by the way? Okay, all right, there's one.
Who that?
Who that? The gravy, the glue, is called roux.
That's right.
3 parts, main parts, onions, garlic, and peppers, right?
That's right.
So a trinity, as you've called it.
That's right.
3 very significant women in your life, a triumvirate trinity. Your mother, Jean.
Yes.
Your mother's mother, Jean's mama.
Yes.
And they all had different influences in different ways, but again, one of the greatest influences was your father's mother.
That's right, Grandma.
Grandma Brazile.
That's right.
Tell us about them in terms of that trinity and establishing your roux and your roots.
Thank you. The roux is very important, because if you're going to make anything that is delicious, you need to have what I call the foundation, which is the roux. And my mother used to say, make sure when you stir it, it will get nutty, it will get very, very dark, but if you stir it right, it comes out just about right, and then you put your onions, your garlic, and your peppers, and you could put anything. At that point, you can use seafood, beef, poultry, doesn't matter, and it's going to taste good. That's just the roux. But my grandmother was perhaps the most important person in my life for 2 reasons. One, my parents were working all the time, and so my mother would get us up in the morning by calling us in order of birth: Cheryl, Sheila, Donna, Teddy, Chet, Lisa, Dimitri, Kevin, Ziola. Did I tell you we were Catholic?
Yes.
And soon after, my grandmother was in the kitchen baking biscuits. That's why I tell people I can't go to Weight Watchers. It's not going to come off. This is that Lord, you know how she'd be listening to music and Lord. And that's what those buttermilk biscuits was all about. And sometimes we put syrup on it, sometimes butter, whatever we could afford. We had those buttermilk biscuits. My mother would comb our hair. There were 6 girls and 3 boys. And my grandmother would just start teaching us lessons. She was a storyteller from Mississippi, and she would tell us about things that happened in her childhood and the need for us to stick together. She would also make us go out in the morning and we hang up clothes because we didn't have a wash machine where to wash them out. We also had to go tend the garden, go tend to the chickens in the backyard. Anyway, she was a taskmaster. And she taught us early on how to complete tasks, how to focus, but mainly how to grow things and how to nurture things. And what I loved best about it, when I got home at the end of the day, she made us all take off our so-called good clothes. I don't know how many of y'all had good clothes back then, but those were the clothes you wore to school. And then we could put on our play clothes, but we had to do our homework. So she was very disciplined, and she was very focused on us being respectful. And it was almost as if we couldn't get in trouble. I mean, we had spies on us. And Grandma led the spy team. They sat in the window or on the porch all day watching the kids as they played. And again, and she made me very responsible for going to check on all her friends, all of the neighbors who were elderly, and she was elderly, but she's like, go check on them and go to the grocery store for them, write a list, Donna. And so what I loved about my grandmother is that she gave me this sense early on that I could be responsible, that I could organize, and that I could fulfill tasks. Now, my mother Jean had this thing. She would say that she was head chief and master. If anybody didn't like it, they could leave. She was the head chief and commander. of the entire house. And even my father had to obey her rules. And my mother came up with rules every day. She said, look, if you violate the Constitution, you'll just go to jail. You disobey the law, you're going to jail. If you disobey God and the commandments, you will go to hell. But if you violate her rules, there was a place that was deeper than a jail cell and hotter than hell. And we never wanted to violate her rules because, you know, quite frankly, they were really rules to live by. As I mentioned earlier, one was, it doesn't matter what people call you. You can imagine at that time in our history, people taunted you because of the color of your skin, the texture of your hair, whatever, the fact that you were poor. And my mother would say, don't listen to them. Don't let them tell you. They can't define your success. And then my grandmother. Talking about all three of them makes me very emotional because my grandmother, Lees, I'm named after Lees. I'm Donna Lees, which means that, oh boy, she was a woman who could take a frying pan and hit anybody across the head if they messed with her. She was my grandmother Frances was a seamstress, and my grandmother Lees was a caterer. So they catered for the people in uptown New Orleans. If I don't have to tell you how much more, but everything was by income and income inequality. But the blacks who served those uptown lived closer to them. So my mother grew up uptown. But my grandmother Lees was ferocious when it came to just freedom and the dignity and the self-worth of individuals, including her 7 children, and how we should be treated as Americans. And I grew up in a household that really respected the flag and respected everything that came with it in terms of respecting and honoring our servicemen and women and authority people. And my grandmother was a Baptist. My other grandmother was Catholic. So you can imagine growing up in 2 households. You go to one and, you know, it's 45 minutes and out. You go to the other, that's 2 hours plus. But she had on WBOK and WYLD, she had on her gospel stations all day, all the time. And our house had this kind of smell, like she was always baking something. So our house smelled like bacon, while my other grandmother's house smelled like something was being fried. But it was always cooking. The kitchen table was the gathering of people, the telling of stories, and the almost teaching children and teaching us how to become better human beings, better citizens, better people. But we always had to serve. We could never sit like ordinary kids and like sit down and play. That was like unheard of. We could have, but it was always like, go check on so-and-so, go help so-and-so, you know, go learn this. We could never we had no frivolous time. I still look for time to be frivolous. You know, I just don't have it because my grandmothers taught us how to serve.
How to serve.
And to respect the Lord. I mean, so it was really tough growing up in a household with 9 children and 2 bedrooms, and everybody had to share. I mean, I still have the sense that you don't discard anything. You don't discard food. You don't discard clothes. You have to really come together, stick together, and that's the way we were raised. And when somebody got in trouble in our family, we would go cook a pot of, this is Monday, red beans and rice. Everybody had red beans and rice. Well, so-and-so is not working. They're not feeling good. Go bring them some red beans and rice. If it was Tuesday, you know. So all the way through to Friday and the weekend when we had, you know, 4 seasons, shrimp, crab, crawfish, or oysters, depending on the regular season, and you had to go and bring it to people. That's how I was raised. Those are my values.
You know, and that's a beautiful story. The only thing I regret is I wish we probably could have done this with, like they do on the big talk shows, with a kitchen setup. We could have been cooking, couldn't we? While we're hearing this story, because so much of food is tied to it. Louisiana.
Yes.
Middle school. You were Colin Kaepernick before there was a Colin Kaepernick, weren't you? You integrating a school, not standing up for the Pledge of Allegiance in the hometown. Shows you folks how everything comes full circle and how small the world is. The hometown of David Duke.
Yes. The home parish. Well, you know, 1971, 1972, busing became a reality, and we were taken from our neighborhood schools, Ralph J. Bunch and Benjamin Banneker, and brought to T.H. Harris. And I guess the folks in the neighborhood was not quite ready to have these kids from across the tracks. And you can define how poor your family was based on which side of the tracks. Well, we lived behind 2 sets of double tracks. So that tells you that we were the poor of the poor. But you know, it's funny because every time it rained, we had waterfront property. We thought, hell, that's what rich people have, but no. But when you're so backed up to the river, you face the fact that every time it rained and the grounds would get real soaked up quick, you had water. You had to go through the water. So going to T.H. Harris, it was, I was old enough to understand because, look, let's be honest, I was raised in a family where everybody read, and of course I had big ears and listened to everybody. And Dr. King assassination affected me profoundly. I mean, it was an emotional moment for all of us. But here we were kids, and people were throwing eggs and tomatoes, and my mother said, look, first of all, don't y'all steal my eggs, and don't y'all steal those tomatoes, because we need everything we can get here. And so we could not throw anything back. So finally I decided, I was a little organizer, and I decided to tell all the kids on the bus, here's what we would do. When we would get there, we would go on the opposite side of where they put the black kids in the middle of the sunshine. You know it's hot down there.
Yeah.
And the white kids had shade. And I said, the white kids don't care. It's their parents who care. And so why don't we just go and just go into the shade? Well, we finally got Mr. Causey. Look at that, I can still remember the principal name.
Right.
I spent a lot of time in the principal's office. You know, all throughout school, I had good grades, but my conduct was always my C, because I will not talk in class. Of course I'm gonna talk in class. I mean, why not talk in class if you believe something was true and the teacher was trying to tell you something false? I mean, I knew about Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, and we're talking about the end of abolition of slavery, and we're talking about Abraham Lincoln. I said, well, what about Frederick Douglass? Donna, you cannot talk in class. Oh, well, here I go again. And I got to the point by 5th grade, Mr. Lee would just let me go home and grade papers. Because I was smart enough to grade papers, but I just talked all the time. My mother said, what's your homework today? I say 500 times, I will not talk in class. And she said, don't they know if they give it to you 1,000 times? I wish my mother had lived long enough to see me working on TV. Because talking at that time meant that I was pointing out injustice, pointing out differences. But I was not opposed to the Pledge of Allegiance. I just said, I pledge allegiance to the United States of America. And you know, and I read it out loud, and then go all the way to the end, liberty and justice for, well, what about us? What about our liberty? What about our justice? And I would just organize people. We need justice, we need liberty, and part of it is we should not be standing in the middle of the sun when there's a shade there, and then we should not be segregated, and people should not be pelting us with eggs and tomatoes. I rallied people against that, and then I finally rallied the parents, and then they came to town.
This is middle school, y'all, so you know she ain't having where to go.
I feel passionate because you know what, that's when I felt I was so alive at that age. I was so alive when I got to high school and college. You should have met me in college. Now, I had my afro then. I was so radical. I used to tell myself, calm down, pull this down, pull this. I would go to Free Speech Alley where the Young Americans for Freedom and the Ku Klux Klan, and I would be the only black person there saying, guess what? We need to free South Africa. And I would just go there and just point out everything that they oppose. Women need reproductive rights. And then I would just read whatever I could read that day and just go to Free Speech Alley.
And fire it up.
And fire them up and just show that you can face fear.
Obviously one of your influences that helped fire you up was Barbara Jordan.
Oh.
And your plan, this was the plan, was for you to manage Barbara Jordan to the White House. She was going to be the first woman president and the first African American president.
Can you imagine that? Here I was 16 years old watching Barbara Jordan at the convention. And July it was in New York, July of 1776, I was a kid. And I wrote in my diary. I used to always write my diary. I just gave all my papers, most of them to LSU. I found more stuff in my basement, of course. Yeah. I even found the phone I took from the floor when Reverend Jackson gave his first speech. I didn't take it. It just landed in my house. AT&T, if they want it back, they can get it at the library. But here I was as a kid, and I wrote in my diary, dear God, when I turn 40, I figured it would take that long. It would take 40 years before we could elect a black president. And I put Barbara Jordan at the top of my list. And I wrote steps that it would take me to become the first black woman to run a campaign, to put a black woman in the White House. And so you can imagine how this has all occurred over the last 25, 30 years of my life, especially since 2003, I wrote The End of Cooking with Grease, that we will see a woman or a minority. I mean, I saw the trajectory. You see, if you sit down today, you can see 40 years from now. You can see how this country is changing, the demographics is changing, the voting patterns are changing, and the willingness to go out the box. And so it was 2003. I mean, so Barbara Jordan, I got a chance to work for Shirley Chisholm. About 1986, 10 years later, I had known Shirley Chisholm, who was the first black woman to run. 10 years later, I met Barbara Jordan. It's unfortunate that both of these incredible lawmakers died before seeing President Obama put into the White House. But it was Hillary Clinton who, in the spring of 2003, introduced my friend and I, a couple of us, to Barack Obama, then a state senator. And we were like, who in the hell is Barack Obama? I mean, Mignon Moore knew Barack Obama because she had Chicago roots. I had no Chicago roots. And it was Hillary Clinton. Hillary used to go around like many of us and say, y'all know so-and-so. We're like, settle down. You know, be a senator. You know so-and-so. And she's the same kind of person today that I met back in the 1980s when she worked at the Children's Defense Fund. Always looking for ways to open doors, always looking for ways to empower people. That's the Hillary Clinton I know. That's why I can defend her. That's why I know her. But I also tell people that throughout the campaign, I knew Bernie. Bernie was with us in the Jackson campaign. You know, when you count the number of white people who were with Jesse Jackson, you're like, Bernie Sanders, the first one.
Right.
The historic one.
Right.
Who went out there and did voter registration, who wasn't afraid to go out there using his name and raising money. That was Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. And so I knew Bernie and Hillary about the same time. Mm-hmm. But Hillary was the one who introduced me to Barack Obama. And now, so what do you do with a Barack Obama, right? What the hell you do with a Barack? And this is back in the spring. I'm sitting in my office. I'm like, what are we going to do with him?
Yeah.
You know the
we
game.
didn't know. No bad. Not yet.
So here's what we used to do. We used to say, okay, this is as you saw black politics, women and other minorities and the GLBT community and others get involved, you try to find paths. And as a Democrat, the earliest path is, of course, you make the party more expansive. We got a lot of work to do as a Democratic Party, and I'm committed to doing that work as long as I'm interim chair. But we had an opportunity to put him in contention to be a keynote speaker.
Yes.
And by that, to raise $2 million. Back then, all I could raise is $2 million. I'm not as good as I used to be, but I can raise 2.5 now, maybe. But you know, that is identifying resources that went to candidates who people did not really believe in. Barack Obama, imagine that, Barack Obama. And he had like some self-funders and others who were running against him. And we said, but you know what? He is so incredibly good that we put him in that position. And he became the keynote speaker. The rest is history. Now, I have to tell you one other story about Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. I think it was June 3rd when the campaign ended in 2008. He called me. He said, Donna, I need your support because I did not commit to him. People used to say to me, Donna, you're a woman. You got to go with Hillary. Donna, you're black. You got to go with Barack Obama. And I said, well, Donna's getting old and grumpy. I could be with John McCain, too. Because I didn't want people to visualize that this was about race agenda for me. It was about, I mean, here I was really literally stuck in the middle of I knew both, okay? Hillary introduces me to Barack Obama. Barack Obama decides to run for president. I'm sitting there like, oh my God.
Right.
So when I told him, I said, I can't make a commitment. He was looking for superdelegates, and I'm a superdelegate, and I'm still one until I step down. He said, I would like you to endorse me, because he was down to like 15 delegates. I said, sir, with all due respect, I cannot do it. I said this on national TV. Go back and check. I said to Anderson Cooper, Anderson said, what are y'all talking about? I said, you're not my boo. And I kept talking to, and throughout that conversation with Barack Obama, he talked about the kind of friendship he had forged, the kind of steadiness that he saw in Hillary, and how much he had learned from her. And he said, the one thing I want to do when this election is over with, he said, I want to make sure that Hillary and I are on the same page. 4 days later, she drops out, and let me just tell you, she didn't just drop out. She dropped into his life as one of his key surrogates. And she went out there and raised a tremendous amount of money and a lot of support for Barack Obama. So if you want to know who made it happen, people talk about Bill Clinton's role in 2012 for the re-election. Think about who made it happen in 2008. She could have taken all of the support. Remember, she had over 18 million voters. I mean, they were neck and neck. I mean, it was just, it could have went in either way. And she showed no bitterness. She went right behind him and said, I got your back, Mr. Then the Democratic nominee, and then, of course, President-elect. And then they became, he put them in the cabinet.
For the sake of unity, could we also say that to some extent, Bernie is doing for Hillary now what Hillary did for Barack Obama?
Bernie is phenomenal. I was with him just about a week ago in Nashua, We went to Nashville Community College. Last night he was in Denver, Colorado. He is campaigning, crisscrossing this country nonstop. He's been to just about every battleground state, and he's not only helping us at the top of the ticket with Secretary Clinton and Senator Kaine, he's also helping us with down ballot races, especially the United States Senate. He's helped us with voter registration. I've hired many of his people to be advisors or to assist us on a day-to-day level at the DNC, and we're proud of his support. I've met with Jeff Weaver, his campaign manager. I, of course, talked to Tad Devine, his chief strategist, along with Mark Longabaugh, because it's important. We are stronger together. And I also reach out to Martin O'Malley. I mean, come on, Martin O'Malley is campaigning all over the country. But Bernie, you know, like I said, it's hard not to call him Bernie. I mean, I could say Senator Sanders, everybody. You know, I'm respectful of his title, just like I'm respectful of Hillary Clinton's title as Secretary Clinton. But I feel like I've grown up with them in terms of their commitment to social justice issues. And I brought a copy of our platform because this is so incredibly important for us as Democrats, whether it's college tuition, income inequality, DC statehood, voting rights, ending mass incarceration, reducing gun violence. This is our Bible. This is our doctrine of faith that we believe in as Democrats, as progressives, that will help guide the next administration, help guide all of those who are running for Democratic offices from the courthouse all the way up to the White House. And I hope everybody get a chance to read it, download it at medium.com. It is what we live by every day at the Democratic Party in shaping our message. And it is documented that this is the most progressive platform in the history of the Democrat. And you would know because you've been... I was there. For all of them. Yep. Since we're on Bernie and Hillary, there's this thing now about WikiLeaks, and Bernie has been very big and magnanimous, saying what's past is past. Correct. And let's move on. First of all, there's a little something in there about you now. You've addressed it. A question you emailed and asked, and you were about to be part of a panel, and you wanted to know Secretary Clinton's position on the death penalty. As you were about to go to a panel, you've denied the accusation that what the detractors are saying, you were giving her, Secretary Clinton, a question before a debate with Bernie. Anything else you want to add to that at this point? I think you've addressed it. Oh, I have, but let me just say something to everybody in this room and everybody who listens to me. I've been involved with the media now for over 15 years. Yeah. And here's how I conduct myself. I know a little bit about a lot, but I know nothing about a lot of things. And whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whether you're running for office or not, if the topic is ISIS, I don't know anything. I have to call somebody who knows a lot about foreign policy. What is our strategy? Well, what are we doing? If the topic is Obamacare or Affordable Care Act, and if we're going through legislation, I call people on the Hill. So I tend to make phone calls. Last week, it was funny when this revelation came out, I had more Republicans and Democrats call and say, you often call us. You're damn right. I don't know what the Republican Party think half the time. Right, so and when I go to debate, and I know my topics, and yes, we do have a sense of the topics, I communicate, not to tip people off, but to find out how I can address it. You know, I am subjected to PolitiFact like journalists. So I want to know what the truth is. I don't want to just get out there and spin. You ever notice when I talk about issues, I can talk about the legislative history of them. I can talk about the genesis of it. I can talk about who's sponsoring legislation. I don't want to go out there with gratuitous information and gossip. So this notion that, first of all, what angered me, and I'm slow to anger, but once I get there, I'm fierce. What angered me was, well, first of all, let's start with the fact that our email system was hacked, okay? It's like a robbery. It's like somebody's in your house. It's Watergate again, isn't it? It's Watergate, but it's Watergate and a very more intrusive. Watergate, they go in and grab folders and files and then run out and leave fingerprints. This is when they're able to get in there through malware and spyware, and they sit. You have no idea what's going on. This is cyber warfare, and it's psychological. So one day you're sitting there and you're typing M-A-R-K, and it's not, and all of a sudden it's not you. I'm like, what the hell? And so all of our systems were corrupted, okay? And this information was removed without permission. it's a crime, and taken by an overseas entity. And all we could figure out when it began to happen was who would want this volume of information and who would want to destroy our database, who would want to interfere with our donors. And it's not just interfering with our donors, it's taking your personal information and putting it out there in the street with no regard to you or your family. And your date of birth, social security number, you know what kind of damage can be done.
Sure.
And then by state law, 47 state law, we are responsible as a party to address any personal information that was stolen and put out in the street. So I have to, one, notify you, and then I got to find ways to protect you and your data and all other things.
Right.
Now, as somebody who's been hacked by the Chinese, because the State Department, I'm on the president appointed me to the J.W. Fulbright board, I get an alert every month. And it's alert that, okay, you're okay. I'm like, oh, hey. But when you get hit, you get hit. And they have to monitor. And we had to do this. And so this cyber intrusion, everybody focused on the emails, the WikiLeaks, but when these cyber thieves, these cyber thugs take information and they use it in such a way to twist it, I know for a fact people I email. I know for a fact what I ask for. I know for a fact what I deliver. And absolutely, I talk to Democrats. I talk to Bernie and Hillary all the time. I talk to their people. They went out there and publicly said it. But the notion that I would somehow or another take information as if I had it from the vault at CNN. By the way, anybody worked at CNN, they ain't never gave up anything. I barely give up. I love CNN. But again, being used because here's the rub. They want to sow seeds between Democrats and Republicans, of course. They want to sow seeds between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. They want to now they want to sow seeds about our entire democratic institution of voting. I mean, if this ain't a pattern, what else? What further proof do you need that this cybercrime was meant to cause confusion, to cause, all type of acrimony? And look, my first glimpse of it back in July, I went up to Philadelphia 2 hours early to apologize. I said, this ain't going to end right, so let me just go ahead and take the big girl step and say, ladies and gentlemen, and I went to Bernie, and I went to Hillary's people, and I've been gone. I had to go to Anita Baker had this song about apology. I felt like I was just apologizing. And I felt, this is what Catholic women do, the contrition. Oh, Heavenly Father, forgive me if I'm, and I apologize, but I said, I made one commitment. I will help make our party stronger, and I will not let these WikiLeaks destroy us. And if I didn't believe in our mission as Democrats, I would not be doing this because, Mark, I tell you, before July 24th, I had 5 jobs. I loved all 5. But the job, what I call my thinkless jobs, they were the most interesting jobs.
Okay. And
And I decided to do my 2 thinkless jobs, but because I love them. I gave up everything. I gave up my ties to CNN, ABC. I gave up all my corporate ties because I'm not a lobbyist, but I have clients who like to utilize my talents for diversity and inclusion program.
Sure.
I gave up my writing for O Magazine, Essence Magazine, for Ms. Magazine. I gave up my syndicated column, and then I said, here, typical Donna Brazile. What is the least amount of money you get in your life? Well, you teach. I'm not giving that up. I love teaching. If I do nothing else in my life, I will teach until I die. I love students. I love teaching. The next generation is so important to me. And this generation of millennials, I would invest every dime of my life in them. They are the best. They created this change that we're witnessing, and I want to be with them. And my second one, and that's why I'm on 4 or 5 campuses a week. I'm going to hit 3 campuses this week. And my second one was being vice chair of the Democratic Party. And you know why? Because I created a position that I support, and that is my job, my unpaid job, is to help expand the American electorate, to register voters, and to recruit people to run for office. What great honor. I mean, how can somebody who said that you're a disciple of Martin Luther King and what he fought for, and Ella Baker and Bayard Rustin and all others, and you don't go out there each and every day to enlarge his electorate? We're going to live one day, ladies and gentlemen, to see not just the first female president after seeing the first black president, but the first Hispanic president, Asian Pacific Islander president, Native American president, openly gay president, because there's no limits anymore. We took the limits off this wall, and therefore that is what I want to be part of as a Democrat.
Indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, well, let me just say this. We do have another something that's come up from the WikiLeaks, which is probably the most controversial. And I just want to prepare everybody for this. It was discovered that in some of the Podesta emails that in 2008, they were beginning to vet people for administration positions. So the reason I say it's controversial, several people you and I know, I'm not going to mention names right now, and they knew I was going to see you today. They said, you know, we're upset about the WikiLeaks. I said, what's wrong? They started looking for jobs as early as now for the next administration. So Donna should tell us that and let us bring our resumes by today. So
oh, yes. Look, by the way, by congressional law, both Clinton and Donald Trump, they both have transitions committees.
Sure.
Chris Christie is heading up Donald Trump, and Ken Salazar, the former senator from Colorado, is working for Secretary Clinton. That's by law.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of time between the election and when you're sworn in on January 20th. So yes, if anybody's interested, there's a transition office downtown. It's paid for by the United States Congress, appropriates the funds, who knew? And there are individuals there who I'm sure would take resumes and information from everybody. So don't be afraid of this.
Right.
This is why people need to become comfortable with the political process and not think that it's always a conspiracy or somebody's getting rigged. You know, even when we discuss whether or not we're going to have a caucus or a primary, that's an open discussion. Whether we're going to allow people to vote a certain time of the day or a certain time of night, that's an open discussion. Whether we're going to have closed primaries or open primaries based on state law, whether or not we're going to challenge. All of this is open, but we need more people to be engaged in the political process and to lend their enthusiasm, lend their intelligence so that we can make it better for everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, Donna Brazile here for Leading Ladies. We've got to take a quick break, but when we come back, more from Donna Brazile. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
So we got about maybe about 13, 14 more minutes. So I'm going to do some quick things so we can get everything. There's a lot of important things. Everybody enjoying themselves? Yeah. So this is great, isn't it?
Thank you.
Are we ready? I'm ready to come back if you are.
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay, so you want to applaud?
Let's go to like
53, 54? Okay, that's good. Okay, you sure? Okay. All right, we'll come back.
We now return to Sirius XM Leading Ladies, Donna Brazile, with your host, Sirius XM Progress's Mark Thompson.
Welcome back to Leading Ladies. An honor to be here with Donna Brazile. Hillary Clinton. Now, this is an important piece of history. You mentioned what was in your basement. You made the arrangements for Reverend Jackson to give his historic speech in 1984 in San Francisco. Walter Mondale's a nominee. His running mate is Geraldine Ferraro. However, that's when Shirley Chisholm and C. Dolores Tucker got with you, and you all formed the National Political Congress of Black Women because you felt that black women were shut out of the process when Jerry Ferraro was the nominee. What is different now? I know that I believe 98% of black women are voted for Hillary Clinton. I think over 80% of Hispanic, Latino women. Black women can now make a difference in the election. But talk to us about the trajectory and how that changed from you all feeling shut out in '84 to now you actually being the chair of the party.
Yeah, what a moment. We felt as though Walter Mondale decided that he would interview several people for vice president. Wilson Goode, I believe, the then mayor of Philadelphia, was the only person of color. I believe Tom Bradley's name was on a short list. But Pat Schroeder, Lindsey Boggs, Geraldine Ferraro, Barbara Mikulski, a long list of female congresswomen were on the list, and no black women. And we thought, well, you know what? If you're going to come up with a list, I think Henry Cisneros was the only Hispanic. If you're going to come up with a list that list should be inclusive of the entire Democratic electorate, which I think is important, right? We formed the National Political Congress of Black Women in 1985 at Spelman College to encourage black women to seek public office, to encourage black women to run as delegates, to encourage black women to vote. And we did voter registration training. We did political training working alongside Emily's List, which also was founded that year in 1985. We committed ourselves to empowering women in the political process. What would happen today is it'd be a different electorate because, look, you have everybody from Barbara Lee to Bonnie Watson Coleman to Marcia Fudge, who was the permanent chair at the convention, to Mayor Stephanie Rollins Blake, to hopefully, and I believe will be Senator-elect Kamala Harris, although the election will be held much later, to Tammy Duckworth, who's Asian Pacific American, to Catherine Mastio-Cortez in Nevada. So there's no question that we've made a lot of progress in 30 years. That was a moment. I also want to mention that I worked on the Mondale Ferraro campaign. I had the great honor of not just working with Geraldine Ferraro during that campaign, but also learning so much from her as well. So the gift of that year continues to give.
You all have seen the hashtag Black Girl Magic. Just for the record, can we go down the list? You were the chair.
Yes.
Leah Daughtry.
CEO of the convention, now part of the transition committee. We're not mentioning names, so I just did it. Mignon Moore, senior advisor to Hillary Clinton. Stephanie Rollins Blake, the secretary of the convention, who called the roll. First time in the history of the United States that a black woman called the roll. And Marcia Fudge, who was the permanent chair of the DNC at the convention. So
You're going to stay on as chair? No. Why not?
Never been on my bucket list. No. I do believe now. People may disagree with me, but this is the millennials this is the largest group of voters in our country, and I would love to see a millennial put in a position to have the opportunity that I've had as an activist. Look, I've been on the DNC now for 20 years. I've already given my rural seat over to Bakari Sellers, a young lawyer, dynamite lawyer, the son of Gwen and Cleve Seller from South Carolina. And Simone Sanders, some of y'all have seen Simone on CNN. I believe in giving back and paying it forward. So it's time to let this seat pass on to another person. Now, that doesn't mean I'm getting out the way. I'm just moving aside to let, this is their turn. And
would you stay with the Voting Rights Institute?
Of course, I will always. Maynard Jackson and I created that. I will always be a part of the Voting Rights Institute.
Now, Orange Man is running around saying that it's rigged. It's rigged. And many people seeing that as code to engage in suppression. You know, he's singling us out. We're going to fix it somehow. He's singled out Philadelphia in particular. Is the Democratic Party organized, mobilized, and prepared to prevent that level of suppression that we've seen? And it must bother you because this was the first black woman to chair, to be a national campaign manager, the Gore campaign.
Right.
And we know what, and the first black woman to manage a campaign that won, because Al Gore won the election. Am I right? Right. Yeah. Amen. So
I have to agree.
So now, this has to make you, as speaking of millennials speak, this has to make you feel some type of way. That when he's running around talking about it being rigged, that's projection, isn't it?
I am going to draft a letter to Reince Priebus.
Okay.
This is I believe our 56 or 58 quadrennial election. We know in our history there have been 4 elections that we've had to contest, including the 2001, the most recent one. 2004 was one that, while it wasn't contested, we reviewed the evidence of forensic evidence of the voting machines.
Right.
There's no question that elections in this country are state and local exercises, not federal, because we have no federal right to vote, as the Honorable Justice Scalia reminded us in Bush v. Gore, and God bless his living soul. But the truth is that what Donald Trump is doing is a strategy, I think, is very, very, very unpatriotic. There's no question in our country that the right to vote is sacrosanct. It is the lifeblood of our democracy. And anytime you undermine our elections, we already have a problem with people turning out. I mean, let's assume the fact that we all know there's over 330 million Americans, about 144 million of us are registered to vote, maybe 146 million are registered to vote. And primary elections turnout often does not exceed 20%. And general elections, maybe in non-presidential years, we get to 40% or maybe 38 to 40%. Some states like Maryland last year, Illinois and others in 2014, 33%. Presidential years, we hit 52, 53%. I mean, to suggest that our democracy is rigged simply because he's fallen behind, because he lacks a message, because he has not run a campaign that has been about enlarging his base of support. It's been demonizing those who would oppose him. And I think this recent commentary on him, on his misogyny, saying that some of the women who've come forward, which I think is an act of courage, to question their value and again their looks. Donald Trump needs to be taken seriously because we live in a very polarized country, and there are millions of Americans who believe that he's speaking the gospel truth, although I don't think it comes from no hymn book. Right. We at the Democratic Party are prepared to ensure that we have a good turnout, that every American, every eligible citizen is able to cast his or her vote, and that vote will be counted. That is what we do, working with State Board of Elections, working with Secretary of States, and that's why you saw recently that we filed a lawsuit in Florida to ensure that people could register to vote. We have filed lawsuits to make sure that there's early voting sites in neighborhoods where there are no quote-unquote public transportation. Right. I mean, it's amazing that we have to raise money for voter protection when this should be a right in a democracy. Yeah. So I think Donald Trump is wrong about this, but he's been wrong about just about everything.
House in play?
I think so. I think so. I mean, there are 17 competitive seats. Many of these so-called red to blue seats are in places like New York and California and Michigan. And so we have a good turnout. There's no question that Nancy Pelosi might be in a position to being our leader again in the House.
We all agree how incredible Michelle Obama is.
Oh, phenomenal.
I don't know about you, Michelle makes me want to run for president now. I wouldn't even think about it. Just to have her give a speech, on even if I didn't win.
Right.
But of course, what we all want to know is she going to enter politics?
I think Mrs. Obama, who I believe she's done an incredible job. One day we were sitting back at the DNC putting together like the list of accomplishments because I think it's important to tell the history of President Obama. Sure. So much of the media, the mainstream media and other has done what I call, they smeared his legacy. And we don't talk about how he's turned around this economy. We've gone from losing 800,000 jobs a month to having, created more than 15 million over the last 6 years. So I want to make sure that we're able to tell their story, their legacy. 20 million people with health care, 129 million people who are no longer discriminated against based on pre-existing conditions. Michelle, with all of the phenomenal work she's done with public education, with public health, we have to tell their story. They are a great couple, but I can tell you based on my last conversation, and that was the opening of the Historic African American Museum of History and Culture. When I asked her, I said, "Are you?" And she looked at me.
She let you get it out. I believe it. She would let you get it out.
I want to just continue to praise her work. And that speech last week in New Hampshire was.
Goodness. Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, go to YouTube. It's incredible. It's worth it.
Yeah, it's powerful.
She spoke. I think she spoke for men and women.
Well, and you mentioned wearing several different hats. African American woman. You even said old and grumpy. I don't think you're old and grumpy.
Yeah.
So in your home, you have Alton Sterling, and that cuts all of us individually as African American. I mean, we feel that when it happens.
Yes.
As a woman, you too must feel the stuff that Trump says and does, because I think all women, unfortunately, have had to experience that. You said something when we were at the last debate in St. Louis that no one else said, because I asked people, is it fair to relitigate the Clinton scandals? And this is what you said to me. I asked you, does the American public want to have that relitigated? You replied, if they want to know how hurt and demoralized Hillary and Chelsea were at the time. And you're the only person I had heard actually speak to what a mother and a daughter, two women, went through, as even though they were in the White House, macro, but also micro of what all women must feel in terms of hurt and demoralization from Trump.
Marriage is a very important institution in our society. And I mean, I watched my parents. My mother died early. My mother died at the age of 52. My father passed away a couple of years ago. But my parents, I mean, they had a great relationship. They had a lot of humor. But you know, when you're a little kid, you watch that relationship, right? Because you're learning from them. And I can only imagine what happened internally. I know a little bit because I'm very close to the Clintons, the Clinton family, and I care about them individually as well as a couple. I knew Hillary before I knew Bill, and of course, here come little Chelsea, and now Chelsea's a grown woman with 2 kids, and I'm like looking at her last week, and I'm like, girl, when did you get so old? But during that time, it was they suffered.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're having your entire life exposed, there's been a break in the marriage, and you have to resolve it, and they had to work it through, but they suffered.
Yeah.
And Chelsea was in school. She had to go through all of the conversations surrounding not just Miss Lewinsky, but everything else. And so I feel like we've litigated, litigated again. And when Secretary Clinton decided to run, when Hillary decided to run for the United States Senate, we litigated against.
Yeah.
2007, 2008 was not as much of noise about it, but Donald Trump signaled early on in his campaign, whenever he goes down the polls, he tries to take somebody with him. And he has signaled over and over again that the most important thing to do when he goes down is to try to take Hillary with him. And unfortunately, we're about to witness a debate on Wednesday night that if you pop popcorn the first time, and then the next time you just settle back with just something stronger or something more spicier, well, I can only imagine what you will have to have this Wednesday night.
Unbelievable. You wrote in your book, Cooking with Grease, growing up, you wrote, Donna, I imagine the Mississippi River was actually the Nile. And from atop the levee, I would see the giant Egyptian pyramids and talk to the pharaohs and the living gods of ancient Africa. It was my mountaintop.
It was.
And got an email today, as you all sent out emails for support and encouragement and money and announcement. The heading was, Donna Brazile, the subject line was, we haven't reached the promised land yet.
No.
So, Donna, as a closing argument, please tell us in November how we can reach the promised land and how we can cook with grease.
Well, thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon, and to thank you for your tremendous leadership. You know, when I was sitting on top of the levee, that was the highest point in that so-called, what I call bottom, that I grew up in. But there was so much I believed in, so much I wanted to see as a little girl. And I would often pray as my parents taught me to pray. And the scripture I would use came from the book of Galatians, chapter 6, verse 9. Do not grow weary in doing good, for in due season you'll reap a harvest if you don't give up.
Yes.
And that scripture stuck in my soul. And I kept telling myself, no matter how tough it was, how difficult it was, to just keep fighting, to keep believing that change could come, that there would be a time that I could see all of the things I could envision just sitting up there. You can imagine looking at a levee, and there was a river. The river was the same color as my skin. And I'm sitting there thinking, I could still see past all this. I could see past the turmoil. I could see past all of the bitterness, but I saw a better day coming, and I saw a future where everybody could sit.
Yeah.
And all I had to do was remain faithful and just keep fighting. And that's my spirit, and that's why I'm fighting for change. And that's why I believe on Tuesday, November 8th, this will be the moment. We created so much change in this country. And once this last door is open, we call it a ceiling, it's the last door. A door that allows the mothers, our sisters, our lovers, our friends, to allow them to share and the leadership table of the country and the world. We haven't had that moment in the United States. We've seen it in other countries, but we have not witnessed it. And she's not just any woman. She's a woman of substance, a woman of grace, a woman of tenacity, a woman of what I call extraordinary leadership, and a woman who has broke open this door for so many. And the fact that we have an opportunity to put it there. This is not going to be an easy election. That's why everybody got to believe that their vote, your vote matters. The fact that you can make so much change by voting. And this is not ordinary change. This is the change that was promised when we decided that we would even take the first step of going out to vote. Change that will ultimately transform this world. We're not going back. We're not going back on any of the issues that I talked about. But more importantly, the number of people that will be able to go forward and leap ahead will be even greater once we make this last chance, this last choice to open that door for all Americans. This is about opening doors.
From being called upon to work directly with Coretta Scott King to get our national holiday, to establishing in the Dukakis campaign, y'all, a conference room in the campaign office known as the Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Ida B. Wells Conference Room. This was in the Dukakis campaign. To gathering the mothers of the movement, those who have lost their young men to gun violence, to now being the chair. That river, that brown river, represents that gravy, that roux. And roux was the glue, right?
That's right.
The roux is the glue that holds all that together.
Yes.
Donna Brazile has been the glue of our movement and of this party, and we're so thankful
Thank you.
to have you. God bless you. Let's
Thank
give her a
you.
round of
Thank
applause
you.
for being here. For all of us here at Sirius XM, we thank you for joining us. Thanks for all for making this possible. This has been Leading Ladies. God bless you.
Thank you.